Long before the maps were drawn and the rivers given names, there was a kingdom called Ijoma. It was a wide, sun-baked land where baobab trees stood like ancient guardians and red earth clung to the feet of farmers and warriors alike. And in the center of it all ruled King Ibrahim the Unbending. He was called that not only because he never lost a battle, but because he never bent, not to enemies, not to elders, not even to the gods. It was said that when he was born, he came out with his fists clenched. By the time he was 30, his armies had conquered 3 neighboring lands. By 40, even the wind seemed to step aside when he walked. His palace doors were carved with scenes of his victories. His throne was raised so high that those who approached him had to crane their necks just to see his face. And kneeling was forbidden. Only the weak kneel, the king would say, his voice deep as thunder. Only those who fear bow their heads. So in Ijoma, no one knelt. Not before elders. Not before shrines. Not even in grief. People bowed stiffly from the waist, but their knees never touched the ground. And the earth remembered. One year, the rains did not come. At first, no one worried. The people of Ijoma were used to waiting. The sky liked to test their patience. But then the river thinned. The wells whispered instead of sung. Mothers walked farther each morning for water. Farmers pressed their palms into soil that cracked like broken pottery. The priest went to the king. "My lord," they said carefully, "the gods of sky and soil are displeased." The king leaned back on his towering throne. Displeased? With whom? The priests exchanged looks. With pride. The king laughed. "Then let the gods come and fight me themselves." And he dismissed him. At the edge of the kingdom lived an old turtle. No one knew how long he had been there. Some said he was older than the first hut ever built in Ijoma. Some said he had once spoken to mountains. He lived beside a shrinking pond under a crooked acacia tree. Children sometimes threw pebbles at him for sport. He never hurried. He never snapped. He simply watched. When the pond finally dried into a shallow pool of mud, the turtle did not panic. He began walking. Slowly. Steadily. Toward the capital. It took him many days. He crossed fields of brittle maize, past women carrying empty calabashes, and walked through villages where even laughter had grown thin. People stared at him. "Where is that old thing going?" they muttered. But the turtle did not answer. He kept walking until he reached the palace gates. The guards burst into laughter when they saw him. "Are you lost, Grandfather Shell?" one mocked, tapping the turtle's back with his spear. "I have come to see the king," the turtle said calmly. The guards doubled over. "You? Yes. For what?" "To save him." The laughter stopped. His voice, steady, certain, that made the guards uneasy. Still laughing, but softer now, they carried him inside as entertainment. The court was full that day. Chiefs, warriors, traders, all gathered to discuss the worsening drought. When the guards placed the turtle on the polished floor, murmurs spread like ripples. King Adinka leaned forward. "What is this?" "A turtle who claims he can save you, my lord." The court erupted in laughter. The king's eyes narrowed. "Speak, creature. You have amused me already. Perhaps you may amuse me further." The turtle blinked slowly. "I did not come to amuse you." Silence fell. "You are thirsty," the turtle continued. "Your people are hungry. Your land is cracking. And still you sit high above them." The king's jaw tightened. "Careful. The sky withholds rain not because it fears you," the turtle said, "but because you do not kneel." The word landed heavy in the hall. No one breathed. You dare, the king said softly, to speak that word in my court. I dare, said the turtle, because the earth dares to dry. The king rose. If kneeling brings rain, then prove it. The turtle nodded. Tomorrow at dawn. Bring your entire court. Bring your warriors. Bring your pride. And what will you do? The king demanded. I will show you what strength truly is. The next morning, the people gathered at the riverbed, now a ribbon of dust. The king stood in gold armor, his cloak bright even in the pale light. The turtle stood before him. You say kneeling brings rain, the king said. Very well. Kneel. The turtle did not move. You misunderstand, he replied gently. It is not I who must kneel. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The king's eyes flashed. I do not kneel. Then your people will continue to suffer. The king stepped closer, towering over the small creature. I have never knelt. Not in battle. Not before gods. Not before death. The turtle looked up at him. That is why the sky waits. Let me tell you something, the turtle said. The king scoffed. You think a story will move me? It moved the mountains once. The crowd leaned in. Long ago, the turtle began, there was a great tree who believed its height made it eternal. It mocked the grass for bending in the wind. You are weak, it said. You bow to every breeze. One day a storm came. The grass bent low, pressing itself to the earth. But the tree stood stiff and proud. The wind snapped it in half. The turtle paused. The grass rose again when the storm passed. Silence settled heavy. You compare me to grass, the king said coldly. I compare you to a man who mistakes stiffness for strength. The turtle turned away from the king and faced the crowd. Who here has lost crops? He asked. Hands rose. Who here has walked miles for water? More hands. Who here has buried hope this season? Even the warriors lowered their heads. The turtle then did something no one expected. He knelt. Slowly. Deliberately. His old legs bent, and his shell touched the dust. He pressed his forehead to the cracked riverbed. I kneel, he said softly, not because I am weak. I kneel because I belong to the earth. A breeze stirred. It was faint, but it was there. The people shifted uneasily. The turtle lifted his head and looked at the king. Your strength has protected them from enemies, he said. But who will protect them from your pride? The king's chest rose and fell. He looked at his people. He saw the thin faces. The hollow eyes. The children too tired to cry. He saw fear, not of enemies, but of him. And something cracked, not in the earth. In him. What if I kneel, he asked quietly, and nothing happens? Then you will have learned humility, the turtle said. And that alone will save you. The king's hands trembled. He had faced spears without fear. But this felt like stepping off a cliff. Slowly, as if moving through water, he removed his crown. Gasps filled the air. He set it down in the dust. Then, before his army, his chiefs, his entire kingdom, King Adinka bent his knees. They touched the earth. A sound escaped the crowd, a mixture of shock and something like relief. The king lowered his head. I am not above the soil that feeds me, he said, voice breaking. If I have been proud, forgive me. The word held its breath. At first, nothing happened. The sun hovered. The air was still. And then, a single drop. It landed on the king's shoulder. Another fell onto the turtle's shell. Then another. The sky opened. Rain poured like drums in celebration. The people shouted and laughed and cried as water soaked the dust. The riverbed drank deeply. The king remained kneeling as rain washed his face. And for the first time in his life, he felt light. When the storm softened to a gentle drizzle, the king rose, not to stand above his people, but among them. He lifted the Tatar gently. "You have humbled me," he said. "No," the Tatar replied. "You humbled yourself." From that day forward, kneeling was no longer forbidden in Ijoma. People knelt in gratitude. They knelt in mourning. They knelt before planting seeds. And the king, once called the Unbending, became known as Adinka the Wise. He lowered his throne. He walked among farmers. He listened more than he spoke. And every year, before the first rains, he knelt at the river. Not because he feared the sky, but because he understood his place beneath it. As quietly as he had come, the Tatar left. He returned to the acacia tree, where a new pond had formed. Children no longer threw stones. They brought him fruit instead. Sometimes they would ask, "Grandfather Shell, did you truly teach the king to kneel?" The Tatar would smile in a slow way. "I only reminded him that even kings stand on borrowed earth." And when the wind rustled the leaves, it sounded almost like laughter. Years later, when King Adinka grew old, he told his grandson, "Power that cannot bend will break. And if ever you forget," he added, "find a Tatar." And so the story traveled, from firesides to marketplaces, from grandmothers to wandering storytellers. Because sometimes the smallest creature carries the heaviest truth. And sometimes, the greatest act of strength,
My grandson, listen
is to
closely.
kneel.
You must learn to observe before you act. Patience is your greatest ally.